Well, it's 3 o'clock. Thank you folks for joining here at the center or wherever you are. We're streaming from our bedrooms and such. I'm Carolyn Merrick. I'm a program coordinator here at the center, and welcome. So today's guest is Phil Jaderborg. He's been with us twice before to do some online presentations. And this one, Phil is the CEO of PJ Networks computer services here in Charlottesville. And he's kindly donated his time and expertise to us. And today's topic, excuse me, I'll let people in, is about digital security and you. So I'm going to give it to Phil. Take it away, Phil, and thank you again for being here.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me. So encryption as an overall topic has a number of different categories that can be covered. So there's VPN encryption, there is encryption of data when it's at rest, basically something like a BitLocker. If you have a Windows computer, or Macs have the equivalent for a Mac, where you can encrypt the data when it's at rest. What we're going to be talking about is data in motion. So basically, whenever you're doing any kind of an activity where a user is connecting to another source across, and normally it's going to be across the internet, if you don't have encryption in place, then hackers can actually gain access in many cases to the flow of the data. And if it's not encrypted, then they can just read it as it's moving, as the data, they can capture it onto a device, and then they can go back and review the data. If you have encryption in place, encryption is going to take all of the packets that are going between the user and, let's say, the web server that they're connected to. Let's say it's a banking site. And all of that data is getting encrypted, meaning as it leaves the computer, it gets scrambled into an unreadable format using what's called an algorithm. And then at the other end, when it's received at that banking website, it gets unscrambled or it gets decrypted. So anybody looking or scooping any of the data between point A and point B can't really see anything because the data is all scrambled. So that's basically the topic we're going to talk about today. I don't have hundreds of slides or even dozens. It's a pretty sweet and concise explanation of encryption and how it works and why it's a benefit. But there's not going to be a lot of what I would call boring details about the history of encryption and who invented it. It's just going to stick to the facts. And I think the information that people really want to know so that they can say that they understand encryption. As Carolyn said, my name's Phil Jaderborg. I'm the CEO of PJ Networks. I've started the company in 2005. We are currently managing about 1,200 end users for our managed services. We also do cybersecurity training through our Cyber Lookout Sentry program, and we probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 users that we've either trained or are actively training with phishing simulations, and mostly with cybersecurity training videos that are 2 to 3 minutes long. But that's kind of where our background is with cybersecurity. And so the evolution of today's threats, this is more of a broad spectrum cybersecurity statement. But according to Cisco, I think the year before last, their annual cybersecurity report, cyber threats are getting increasingly sophisticated, and the end game isn't always a ransom. Sometimes it's just the pure destruction of data. And in fact, when it comes to ransomware, my team has spent the last month helping a company that reached out to us when they got hit with ransomware, and we're talking about 20 terabytes of data, business data got corrupted. And to make matters worse, they didn't have current backups of about half of that data. So 10 terabytes of data is going to be recovered from a recovery point from back in October. And with a company of like 25 to 30 employees, that's a lot of labor is going to have to be redone. So when we're talking about being careful with our data, there's so many different aspects of it, but one of the big ones is knowing how to protect it when it's in motion, which is what we're going to be talking about with the VPN. Let me see if I can move this little dock with the pictures. There we go. So basically, the recommendation is you can't solve all of your problems with technology. Education is important. For example, even though we're going to be talking about using technology to protect data, which is going to be VPN technology, if you don't even have the knowledge that VPN solutions are available and what they do, then you might not even think to go out and search for one. So I think it's important to have a fundamental understanding of the different tools and resources that are available to you. And then as an end user, you can decide what's the best fit for your needs. So there are some misconceptions about how VPNs work and what encryption does. There's we believe, PGA Networks believe strongly in what we call a multi-layered solution, where you have a firewall that's between the end users, let's say at a business site, and the internet. But inside of the network, inside of that firewall, there's going to be endpoint protection, meaning some sort of an antivirus protection, individual Windows firewalls. VPNs and encryption are one level of the security in the multi-layer stack. So some of the common misconceptions are that encryption is really only needed by organizations that are legally required for compliance reasons to have it in place, such as HIPAA compliance or NIST compliance. Absolutely not the case. It's absolutely something we recommend for people day-to-day activities on the internet, especially if you're in the public using a public hotspot. SSL, which is a secure, we're going to be talking about SSL, encrypts data everywhere, which is not the case. For example, SSL doesn't encrypt, typically is not used for data at rest. Typically, SSL is going to be used for data in motion, meaning an active internet connection. If your data is encrypted, it can't be stolen, which is also false. If a client has encryption on their server, for example, and the server gets stolen, then the thief won't be able to access the data that's on that server without having the right decryption key. But while the server is actively up and running, users are actively accessing the data that is encrypted. That data could be copied to a thumb drive and it could be stolen, because when it gets copied to the thumb drive, it's no longer encrypted. So just because you hear the word encryption doesn't necessarily mean that something is theft proof. Encrypted data is secure data. Once again, on the same level, you'll understand at the end of this webinar what encryption can do for you, but it's not the end all be all. It's just part of a solution. And then a misconception that encryption doesn't make the cloud more secure. On the contrary, the point of using a VPN tunnel, using encryption, is to make your internet activities more secure. So small organizations and individuals are especially at risk, because unlike large corporations and enterprise-sized organizations, they don't have millions of dollars to put into security. Ironically, it's the companies that do have some of the most available resources, like, for example, SolarWinds, who, if you've been paying attention to the news, SolarWinds got compromised by foreign characters. Malicious code was injected into SolarWinds. SolarWinds is an IT solution provider, so they provide software and specifically security solutions. And at some point about a year ago, somebody was able to gain access into their systems and inject code into their programs that would then make those programs vulnerable. SolarWinds then sold and deployed their software out to government agencies and enterprise class organizations. And then all of a sudden, about I guess a month or 6 weeks ago, it was discovered that there were huge data breaches occurring because people were using that avenue of SolarWinds vulnerability to get in. And once again, SolarWinds is a multi-million, probably a multi-billion-dollar organization, and yet they were able to get compromised. So that just goes to show you, it's not a matter of how much money you have or even how much money you spend, but what you're paying attention to. So, data encryption is one of the most secure types of data protection. It's in cryptography, encryption, I'll just read off the screen. In cryptography, encryption is the process of encoding information. What it does is it takes the original information, let's say it's a Word document, and it uses an algorithm, a mathematical formula to take that information and scramble it in such a way that when it arrives at its destination, a key can be provided that will basically decode it. So because of data encryption and the complexity of, let's say, a 256-bit encryption, it's practically unbreakable, meaning that even the FBI, if somebody's using a higher level, not the older versions, but a newer version of encryption, even the FBI getting their hands on, for example, an iPhone, there have been multiple lawsuits and criminal charges that have happened because the government, FBI, has gotten their hands on somebody's iPhone and they want to get the information on it, but the information is encrypted, and all of the resources of the FBI don't have the technology to decrypt that data. So encryption can be incredibly secure. While it's in that case, that's data while it's at rest. We're going to be talking about data in motion. So how does encryption work? Data encryption, it's a security method where information is encoded and can only be accessed or decrypted by a user with the correct encryption key. And we're going to talk about two different kinds of encryption. Encrypted data, which is also known as ciphertext, appears scrambled or unreadable to a person or entity accessing without permission. So an example of a very simplistic type of encryption would be if I substituted every letter in the text on the right. Data encryption is a security method. If I substituted each letter with its corresponding number in the alphabet, like the letter D would be a 4 and the letter A would be a 1. And if I converted every letter in that text on the right side of the screen into numbers, that would be a very simplistic form of encryption. It would be relatively easy to crack. I mean, if somebody stared at it for probably 5 minutes and was told, well, this is actually readable text. If you converted it, it probably within a few minutes, they would look at it and realize where the correlation, numbers for letters, letters for numbers, and they would be able to figure it out. True secure encryption is going to be on a much more complicated level where there's a mathematical algorithm that's unique to that encryption key is going to be used to apply. But that would be a very simple version of data encryption. So the two fundamental types of encryption is there's symmetrical encryption. Symmetrical encryption, it's the simplest kind of encryption. It involves one secret key. Symmetric encryption is an old and best known technique. It uses a secret key that can either be a number, a word, or a string of random letters. To give an example, Word, Excel, and Adobe Acrobat use symmetrical encryption, meaning that if you take a Word document, and I don't know if anybody's ever done this, but you can take a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet, and when you go to save it, you can choose to encrypt it or it's called password protection. But what happens is you provide a passphrase or a password that's going to be used to encrypt that document. Then if you email it to somebody, when they receive it, when they go to open that document, it's going to prompt them. It wants the exact same key that you typed in to encrypt it. So it's symmetrical. The key that you're using to encrypt it is going to be the key that's used to decrypt it. And you could provide that encryption key or decryption key to the recipient, either in a phone conversation, or let's say maybe you text it to them. You wouldn't want to include it in the text of the email that you're sending them with the attachment. That would kind of, hey, here's a password protected spreadsheet. The password is password 1234. It would be better if you just called them up and say, I just sent you a protected document. The password to get into it is this. Very easy to use, very simple to figure out. It doesn't take any experience. Somebody knows that when they click on it, they're going to get prompted for a password, and you tell them what the password is. Hopefully they'll put one and one together, put the password in, and then they can get into it. Once they get into it, they have control of that document. You can choose to encrypt a document or a spreadsheet or even an Adobe PDF. You can say password protected so that even just to read it, it requires a password, or you can password encrypt it and say in order to make changes to it. So that would be important. For example, if you wanted to create an Adobe Acrobat, and let's say it's a legal contract, it's some sort of maybe it's a lease agreement, or it's some sort of a legal document that you've created or that your attorney's created, and you want to share it with somebody else and have them sign it, you want to know that when you get a signed copy back, it hasn't been altered. That's when you would encrypt it to a level where in order to make changes, you need a password. You could even send that without needing a password to open it. You would just need a password to encrypt it. So symmetric encryption, same password on both ends from the sender to the recipient. Asymmetric encryption is going to be different. Asymmetric is typically what you're doing, is what you are using when you're surfing the internet. Asymmetric encryption is also known as public key encryption. Unlike normal or symmetric encryption, asymmetric encryption encrypts and decrypts the data using two separate yet mathematically connected cryptographic keys. These are known as a public key and a private key. For example, when you go to an HTTPS website, it's using asymmetric, where there's a public key that is applied to the website or to a file. And then a private key is being held at the recipient's end. So if I go to an HTTPS website, The server is going to hand me a private key that is then used to create a communication channel with that web server. Like, let's say I'm connecting into a banking website. So a certain amount of protection is being provided between the end user and the server, because in order to connect to it, you have to have a matching key. Doesn't mean that you cannot, that your data couldn't be compromised by something like a keylogger virus on your computer that sees when you're typing in your password. But any financial institution, in fact, almost every website you're going to visit these days is going to be an HTTPS website, which, and the S is secure. And even Google, for example, Google search engine, if you do a search and results come up that show websites that are not encrypted with an SSL certificate, you'll actually see a warning from Google basically saying this is not a secure site. Doesn't mean they're compromised. It doesn't mean they've been hacked. It just means that there's no encryption going on between the person accessing the website and the website itself. So how does encryption work for a VPN connection? So those were several different kinds. Those were several different kinds of encryption that you can use with files that you're storing or with files that are in motion. But how does it work when you use a VPN connection, for example, to get to the internet and you want to know that all of your internet activity is secured from prying eyes? Let's say you're at a Panera Bread shop and you're connected to a public access point, which are known to be honeypots for hackers who want to come sit down, have a cup of coffee, and with the right software, and it's not very expensive or sophisticated, they can basically see other people's connections to that public Wi-Fi, and they can actually look at the information that's being transmitted. So it's really simple. So the way the personal VPN works is your computer is running a piece of VPN software, and before you do any online activities, you initiate your VPN connection or your VPN tunnel to the internet, which connects to, like if you were using a Norton VPN solution, your computer would initiate a connection to the Norton VPN server, which would then say, fine, from this point forward, all of your internet activities are going to happen from the VPN server out to the internet. So this user, let's say if they go to Amazon.com to make a purchase, technically that person is not connecting from their computer to Amazon's website. They're connecting from their computer to Norton's VPN server, and then the VPN server is then giving them a session to the Amazon website. That means that if this hacker in the middle is viewing the data flow that's going on, it will literally look like gibberish. If anybody here has ever seen the movie The Matrix, where you have that green screen with all the characters falling from the top to the bottom, that's basically what the data would look like to somebody, a hacker. It would look just like random letters and characters. One of the cool things about that movie was some of the people in the movie could actually look at those screens and tell what they were saying. They were that good at manipulating and interacting with the matrix. But basically, even with government level technology, the only way that somebody would be able to crack this VPN connection is if a flaw or a vulnerability was found in, for example, the Norton VPN software, or the Norton VPN server got compromised. Let's say, to pick on SolarWinds again, let's say that the VPN server was running some sort of a SolarWinds Enterprise Orion software, and because it was running that software, it then got exposed to the vulnerabilities that SolarWinds did. Now that that server has been compromised, yes, hackers will absolutely be able to see, and basically what they'll be able to do is decrypt your data as it's flowing. So one of the single most important rules about using a VPN solution is you want for your software that you're running on your computer to be up to date. And thank goodness, almost all of security related software will prompt you when there's a new patch out. So a new patch gets released for Norton VPN, you should get an email or a pop-up saying, hey, there's an update. When you see those, don't ignore them. Don't say maybe later, click on it and update it, because those patches are specifically released because the vendor, Norton in this case, discovered that there was a vulnerability that somebody out there, that this guy, the hacker guy in the middle, Norton realizes that there's an encryption vulnerability or an exploit, and so they update their software here, or they update their VPN server to make sure that it's secure. And it's an ongoing battle. Every day of the week, hackers are trying to get into into these kinds of security software solutions. And every day of the week, the manufacturers and the vendors are patching it. So it's a never ending battle. So to read what's on the screen, VPN encryption lets you protect sensitive data like credit card numbers or bank account details or login credentials from cyber criminals, since they won't be able to eavesdrop on your internet connections when you use public Wi-Fi. VPN encryption can be defined as a means of encrypting plain text data, which is readable, to make sure that it shows up as indecipherable gibberish to anyone who tries to monitor it. For example, your ISP, if they wanted to know what kind of internet traffic you were doing, let's say you're a big gamer and maybe your internet service provider throttles back gaming bandwidth because gamers use up a lot of bandwidth. So let's say they want to make their bandwidth go as far as possible. They might try to throttle back some of that speed. If the user was using a VPN connection, the ISP wouldn't be able to see what kind of traffic was even there. They wouldn't know whether it's banking data or gaming software or somebody just looking at Pinterest. They wouldn't be able to tell the difference. All right, so now we're going to talk about types of SSL connections, of encryption protocols. So first one is Ipsec, stands for Internet Protocol Security. It's a group of protocols that are used together to set up an encrypted connection between two devices. So for example, this would be a firewall. Let's say this was a company that had an office in Santa Barbara, California, and they have an office in Charlottesville, Virginia. The firewall or router would be configured on this end to create a secure tunnel to the firewall on this end. And between the two, you have what's called a site-to-site VPN. In most cases, those are going to be using Ipsec. There are such things as Ssl VPN connections, site-to-site, but typically they're going to be using the Ipsec protocol. It helps keep the data set over public networks secure. Ipsec is often used to set up VPNs. It works by encrypting the IP packets. So what it's doing is it's taking the individual data packets, which are very, very tiny, and it's encrypting them individually. And then when they get on the other end, the firewall on the other end has the encryption algorithm to decrypt them. So the end user doesn't even know that the data is being encrypted. The end users don't have to know, they don't have to run any special software, because everything that happens over this tunnel is being encrypted. Everything that happens outside of the tunnel at their individual locations is not. So if there was a hacker, let's say on the network in Charlottesville, and somehow they got into the building and they connected to the network there, the fact that the two offices are using an Ipsec tunnel between them would not protect the data of user A on the network in Charlottesville from user B on that same network. Then the traffic within that local network is not encrypted, only the traffic going through the internet. And in order to provide even more security to site-to-site VPN connections, a company can basically rent or they can either buy, or normally they're going to be leasing a dedicated internet channel between two buildings that's total, like there's no other traffic on that tunnel between point A and point B. So basically they pay a premium price to get a dedicated circuit that goes from one end to the other with no other traffic on it. But even in those cases, they're running VPN security on it, but it's a dedicated tunnel so that they have less worries about somebody hacking into it. The internet protocol is the main routing protocol used on the internet, Ipsec. It designates where data will go using IP addresses. Ipsec is secure because it adds encryption and authentication to this process. So the site-to-site tunnel, which we were just talking about, it's a tunnel that connects two locations, and this is just a different illustration of the same concept. Two internet-capable firewalls. In most cases, they're going to be the same brand. They don't have to be. This one could be a Netgear, and this one could be a TP-Link. But the data that's on this end is not encrypted. The data that's on this end is not encrypted. The data that goes between the two is all encrypted. Yeah, I think that explains that picture in a nutshell. So now we're going to talk about a different encryption protocol. So SSL, Secure Sockets Layer, is a different protocol than Ipsec. It's the two between Ipsec and SSL. Those are going to be your two most popular protocols for doing VPN tunnels. Its origins are much older than Ipsec. I'm sorry, Ipsec is the original one. SSL is a more recent method, and it's becoming increasingly popular. SSL, for example, is what almost all of your end user, like your Norton and your Nord VPNs and your Ghost VPNs, the stuff that you go and you buy online or you buy at Staples and you install on your computer, in most cases, is going to be using an SSL security protocol. I know that for us, for example, when I connect into my work network from my home office, we're running a Sophos XG firewall. It uses a VPN client called OpenVPN, and OpenVPN uses SSL as the core of it. So because of that, we have an SSL certificate installed on our firewall here. And when I dial in from my home internet connection and it talks to the firewall and I provide my password, and I am using multi-factor authentication. Once the handshake is established, it's as if I had a VPN tunnel created between the two locations. But if somebody else on my local network is trying to get to the internet, it's not going to be going through my tunnel. My tunnel is specific to my connection. So that's basically what the SSL VPN tunnel does. It's a single remote user that's connecting either to the intranet or to the internet or to a web server or to an office workplace. But all the traffic is going to be within that VPN tunnel. And in the picture that we had a couple of pictures back, in this case, this is going to, there's like a 90% chance that this is going to be an SSL VPN tunnel, and an SSL certificate was required in order to connect into the Norton VPN server. So a remote access VPN connection, and I realize that some of this is redundant, but it's kind of just looking at the same information from several angles so that it gets a little bit of clarity. Some people look at this and say, well, okay, I got it on the first slide, Phil, and other people at the end of it all are going to say, can I see that? Can I see that one again? But I like to hit the same topic from several angles so that if one explanation doesn't make sense, maybe the next one will. So a remote access VPN connection is the alternative to a site-to-site VPN tunnel. Once again, using SSL, it lets remote users access web applications, client server apps, and internal network utilities and directories without the need for specialized client software. SSL VPNs provide safe communication for all types of device traffic across public networks and private networks. So once you establish that SSL VPN connection, all of the traffic is encrypted, not just one application. All traffic between a web server and an SSL VPN device is encrypted with the SSL protocol, or an older one might use a previous version of security called TLS, although hopefully it's not, it's using the most current. They solve a longstanding frustration around wide area networks, as well as Ipsec-based VPNs, because there's very much an ease of use. It takes about 5 minutes to install an SSL VPN client software and set it up with a password so that when you go to Panera Bread, or whether you go to the public library, when you connect to the internet there, or a hotel, you connect to the internet there, you launch your SSL VPN software, everything you do from that point should be secure. The ease of use and the quality allows for greater work efficiency, lowering costs, and increasing employee and business practices. When properly used, SSL VPNs do not impact network security at all as far as like minimizing it. And I think your average personal VPN solution is going to cost somewhere in the $50 to $75 a year range. So you're looking at about typically $5 a month, maybe $10 if you're using a premium one. I will have to ask forgiveness for the fact that I'm not super familiar with the private sector, which meaning the retail stuff that you buy at Staples or maybe at Best Buy, because I don't have to use it. Because I have a VPN at the office, and at home I have a VPN client I can connect into the office. I can connect into the office server, and then I've got a VPN tunnel to the internet, and everything I do at that point on the internet is going to be encrypted. So I don't have to go out and buy the software. But I will say that most of the privately purchasable or subscribable VPN software, like your Norton and your Nord VPNs and all that, are extremely affordable, and they do give you a significant amount of security for what you're paying. So that's the end of the canned presentation. I was going to take some questions, and then depending on how long they run, I also have another little segment we can go over and review some more of the common myths about encryption and VPNs. But it seems like we always have plenty of questions out there, so I wanted to make sure I left plenty of time today to cover those. So, however you want to handle that, Carolyn.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. I think this would be a good time to take a break and ask questions. Do you mind unsharing your screen so I can see folks? It makes it a little easier for me.
Sure.
And then you can always share it back if we get time. There's 2 questions in the chat. And Phil, I'm receiving spam emails from friends who've been hacked. What do I do if I'm hacked and my friends start reaching these bogus emails from me?
All right, I'm trying to see if I can get the chat screen on. I heard you read it. I'm not a Zoom user. I'm more of a GoToMeeting. Let me see if I can. Oh, chat, I see it. Okay. Spam emails from friends who have been hacked. What do I do if I'm hacked and my friends start receiving these bogus emails? That's a difficult one. That's kind of like once the cat is out of the bag, the cat is out of the bag. So what'll happen is somebody will get hacked or breached. Their address book will get gleaned by the hackers. Those email addresses that were in their address book are now forever in the hands of the hacker. I mean, there's no way to get them back. I mean, once they get them, they've got them. And unfortunately, oftentimes these hackers will turn around and sell these addresses en masse on the internet, on the dark web. If you've ever heard the phrase the dark web are places and private servers on the internet that people go where they know that they can find personal data for sale. And some of it is as simple as a list of email addresses, which would probably go for about a penny a piece, all the way up to people's credit card numbers and CVV codes, which would obviously fetch a heftier price. But the best thing you can possibly do if you think that you've been hacked, and normally you'll find out because you'll get an email from somebody, a reply to one of these hacked emails. So even though you didn't send it, the reply address is you. So if I send an email from phil@pjnetworks.com, if the hackers send one as me as the sender, then when somebody replies to that, instead of going back to the hacker, it comes to me. And then I know somebody's been getting emails from me that I didn't send. That's your first warning. Typically, if that happens, the first thing you want to do is change your email password so that somebody can't get back into your mailbox or into your address book. And then I suggest highlighting everybody in your address book if it's fairly current, and just sending a broadcast email that says, "Hey, everybody," and you should probably do it as a BCC. Send it to yourself and BCC everybody else, so you're not giving everybody in your contact book everybody else's address. And you say, "Look, if you receive an email from me that looks spammy or looks suspicious, it probably is. If somebody's gotten a hold of my address book, I really apologize. I've changed my password, but and typically the good news is these type of activities have a window of opportunity where for the first week or two that a hacker gets their hands on an address book, there'll be a lot of spams going out, but eventually they almost always go away on their own. They just stop going out. And so if it lingers for long, you may actually, if it's a Gmail address, like I can't change mine, it's phil@pj-networks.com because I've been using that business address for 15 years. I don't want to change it. But if it's a personal email address and you don't have thousands of people that have it, just go out and get another one. Just go out and get a different Gmail or a different Yahoo and stop using the original one, because there's no way to make the hackers stop using your email address. So anyway, that's what I would recommend to do.
That's so just changing your email they will not be able to.
If you change your email address and then blast everybody in your contact list, letting know that you've dropped the old one and you're using a new one, then everybody who gets something from the old address will know that it's not legitimate. Gotcha. They can even block it at that point. The other thing, though, I would recommend that you would do if you find that if the other thing that happens, and this is actually a really important point, what happens more often than people's address books, than people's computers getting compromised, is somewhere somebody will get, let's say, Carolyn's email address. A hacker will get that and they will use it as the send as address. Mm-hmm. Even if they didn't get access to her address book, they'll still use her address to send spam, to send hacking emails. And strangers that she's never heard of might be replying back to her going, Carolyn, I don't know who you are, but I wish you would stop sending me those emails. We have had that happen to clients. And the problem is there's zero you can do to stop it because it's not coming from that person. And it was, and nobody ever gained access to their address book. It's just somebody who got your email address and decided to send spam in your name. And those, once again, almost always have about a 7 to 14 day lifespan. And then they just trickle away and stop happening. And it's very annoying to clients of ours when it happens and they hear that there's nothing we can do about it because we're trying to explain it. It would, the best analogy I have for this would be, I could take a letter and write, I wish you would keep your dog on a leash, and stick it in an envelope and put my neighbor's address on it and put Carolyn's name on the return address and put a stamp on it and stick it in a mailbox. And there's nothing Carolyn can do about it, right? If I did that, my neighbor's going to get a letter from Carolyn that says, please keep your dog on a leash. Carolyn never sent it. What can you do about it? Nothing. I could do it the next week and the next week and the next week. So the good news is the hackers have a relatively short lifespan that they can use these borrowed addresses before recipients catch on that these are bogus, which is why they're constantly cycling through them. They typically, it happens to I get them too. About once a year, I will get replies. I'll get bounce backs where spammers will send 5,000 spam messages out and use my address as a sender. And I'll have a dozen of them that are bounce backs telling me that these are no longer valid email addresses. I never sent it, but it tells me that somebody's using, it's called spoofing. Somebody's spoofing my email address, which is very different than somebody actually getting my address book. In one case, they're using me as the sender. In the other case, they're using my address book for the receivers. So anyway, hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Vexing, but good to know. You got the rest of them? Do you want to look at the chat? Or
let me see. Yeah, sorry. Let me look back here.
No worries. I can read them out.
Boy, they rolled right up.
Yeah.
If you do not use, okay, if you do not use public Wi-Fi as personal VPN recommended, it becomes less urgent if you're at home and let's say you're connecting to, if you had Comcast internet at home and your computer was plugged directly into the modem, not wirelessly, but plugged into it, then your chances of getting hacked or compromised go down dramatically. As soon as you add a wireless device into the mix, then let me see. I'm gonna bring up something on my screen and show you guys. Let me see if I can share my screen. All right. So this is something I like. When I go to a business and they're using a home router, meaning they went to Best Buy and they bought a $39 or a $49 Netgear or a TP-Link wireless router access point, and they set it up for their business network. And once again, for personal use, I understand. But if you're like, if you're $1 million business, don't go and buy a $30 firewall. Buy a business class firewall. So one of the things I'll do is I pull up Chrome and I say how to hack a Netgear wireless router.
Dang.
Hey, I just found a 4-minute and 29-second video. So not only do I have instructions on how to do it, people have given me a video. So if you're running a Netgear wireless router R7000 in your house and your next door neighbor has a teenage kid who's like kind of into hacking, guess what? He can hack in and see what you're doing. However, if you were running a VPN client, it wouldn't matter because all of your traffic between you and the internet would be encrypted. So that's, so basically there's dozens and dozens and dozens of articles about how to hack home routers. So basically I would say, yes, if you're using a wireless connection at home, you can absolutely be compromised. What are your feelings about password saving apps? I think they're great. I think that they facilitate something that's really important, which is trying to keep a unique password for for each of your online sites. And I know it's a daunting task. And so I have a compromise there because I have dozens, if not 100 online accounts, and I kind of have them grouped into categories. So anything that I'm trying to protect financial data, like my banking information, or maybe an online trading, like a TD Ameritrade, I use a unique password for each one of those. so that if one of them gets compromised, at least they're not all getting compromised. But then I have a lower level of security. For example, the password that I use to order a Domino's pizza, or that I use to go online and do other things like that, where it's where I'm not really doing it. Well, even the online thing, like if you're using a credit card online, you don't want that to get compromised. But the bottom line is, if I'm using something to sign up for a newsletter or whatever, I don't mind using a same password for the dozen different newsletter websites, because I'm not doing anything secure on them. I don't really care about that password. If it gets compromised, I can go in and I can change that. And Chrome is great, I think, because Chrome will actually tell you when you go to a website that is prompting you for a password. Chrome will compensate 3 of the passwords that you have stored in Chrome have been compromised. And so you have to go and look at them. But for as far as keeping passwords in a password saving app, keep LastPass is probably the single most popular one. I kind of like KeePass, KeePass, KeePass. But unlike LastPass, it doesn't fill passwords in kind of for you in real time. So LastPass, from what I've heard, is not only one of the more secure ones, but it's very easy to use, and it's relatively secure. I do think LastPass may have been compromised. Let me do.
Oh no, that's mine. Don't say that.
Well, I mean, but the good news is, whenever one of those get compromised, they immediately release some sort of a patch, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So there's articles. What happens if LastPass gets hacked? Looks like there may have been one back in 2015. So yeah, so when somebody like that gets compromised, because it's their reputation on the line, they're really fast to release a patch for it. And that's when you would get a prompt from your LastPass software saying, hey, there's an update available. That's what you want to install. Because otherwise, what the hackers do is they love to share things like, hey, there's a vulnerability in LastPass. By the way, here's a little video I wrote that's going to tell you how to hack it. So it's a never-ending battle. So I do think that password saving apps are good in that they allow you to have a unique password for every important website you visit, which is important because otherwise, if you're using 1 or 2 or 3 basic or even complex passwords, if one of them gets hacked, they all got hacked, right? Somebody's got their access to all of those websites. For home computers used for banking, what do you recommend for security measures? Same for both Windows and Apple devices. I would, once again, VPN software and a good endpoint protection, a good antivirus protection. I'm trying to remember what the one is that the guys use downstairs in the shop for Macs. I think they're using Avast for Mac. So a lot of these no, Tom's saying, is there something else, Tom?
No, Clay Sisk and I are Mac experts, and we highly recommend against any antivirus software on Macs. It will screw them up. The Macs have a program called XProtect, which is built-in antivirus software,
Right.
And we do not use. Apple, as such, recommends against the use of antivirus software.
Okay, that's good to know, because up until about the last year, we were very strong advocates of the fact that Windows Defender was not a very secure security solution. And so we were always recommending, when somebody brought the computer into a shop, they would put some sort of an antivirus on it, even if it was free, like an Avast. But in the past year, the team has basically decided that, looking at some of the reports and statistics and the different testing that's been done, we don't do that anymore. The Windows Defender, I think, is finally getting to the point to where it may be. Macs have always had good protection. I think PCs are getting to the point to where Windows Defender is going to be just about as good as at least any of the free solutions like Avast or whatever. I still like to use Viper Internet Security on my home computer because I like the fact that it does malicious website blocking, and it also provides a couple of extra features like an additional firewall. But I'll definitely take Tom's recommendation. So if he's saying don't put endpoint protection, then I wouldn't do it. But a VPN is probably never a bad idea. And of course, these softwares that you can get for VPNs. Hey, Tom, do you know, does Apple have a built-in VPN solution that provides?
No, it does not. TunnelBear is the one that I've used, which is quite outstanding. 1Password is also, kind of the gold standard for password vaults, and highly recommend that. and particularly on your financial accounts and other very important things. I can tell you, I use passwords that are a minimum of 25 characters long, and they are generated by 1Password. As a matter of fact, I highly recommend against using passwords and duplicating them across accounts, as you recommended, Phil. And also, I never use passwords that are less than 15 characters long.
Right.
Passwords to me are the first line of defense, and they're
Right.
so critical and important. And you mentioned two-factor authentication.
Yes.
And for those that don't know, that is essentially where you not only have a password, but it also prompts you and sends a 6-digit code to your iPhone or your Android phone, and you have to put in that 6-digit code. And that to me is the gold standard of personal protection. Not only a minimum 15 to 20 character password, but also that 6-digit code from your phone. And I would implement that in every single place that you can, which is in Google and Dropbox and Twitter and Facebook and just about everywhere you go. It's a little bit of a pain to do, but boy, it's certainly just fantastic protection.
Absolutely agree. And actually, once you've set it up for 1 or 2 online accounts, it becomes pretty simple. Typically, what will happen is when you turn on multi-factor, and you can actually, I mean, if, for example, if you wanted to turn it on for your banking, you can probably go to your banking help section and type in 2FA or multi-factor, and you'll have step-by-step instructions. But once you get it implemented, and I'll show you mine real quick, and the only reason I don't mind the fact that people can see the codes, there's 6-digit codes for 6 different programs. And the reason it doesn't matter that you saw that is because in the next 60 seconds, they're all going to change. So not only would you have to have my username and my password to get into any of these online services, and most of these are to get into our tools, but every 60 seconds, a different 6-digit code is going to be generated. And without that 6-digit code, even with my username and password, you can't get in. So that really, I mean, now there have been some recent news reports that hackers are getting more sophisticated about working their way through multi-factor, but it absolutely provides 10 times the protection. It amplifies the protection you have almost to like an exponential level to have that set up. And there's multiple ways to do it, but if you Google has a free program called Google Authenticator that works very well. And once you've done it, it's a really easy process to do, and it's not that much of an inconvenience. And it is more secure to have a multi-factor authenticating software installed than to receive a text message. Although that is better than nothing. You could, some of the sites you're going to set up multi-factor on, you actually have to, when you type in your name and your password, it'll say a text message has just been sent to you with a 6-digit code. That's the method of multi-factor that has kind of been compromised recently, because if a hacker's smart enough, they can figure out a way to intercept that. I don't know the actual technical mechanism they use for that, but I do know that something like Google Authenticator, somebody would literally have to have their hands on your phone to get your code. So yeah, between a VPN connection and multi-factor, and then as Tom said, a long, complex, unique password, you're going to be doing about all you can do from a home user point to keep your stuff.
There's one additional thing I'd like to point out. For those of you that have a brokerage account with Merrill Lynch or E-Trade or wherever you have, most of those companies now have what I call a dongle that they will send you that you not only would input a very long password, which mine are 40 characters long, then you get a dongle that produces a 6-digit code, which you have to put in after your password. So that is a form of almost very, very secure authentication of your account. And I would look into that for your brokerage account, because that's kind of the key to the kingdom. Make sure your brokerage account is as secure as possible.
Yeah, and you're not talking about one of these USB keys. You're actually talking about a little digital display, correct?
Yeah, it's a little digital display that every time you log in, it generates a different 6-digit code yourself, and you have to put in that 6-digit code in addition to your password. And so it's very, very important for your most important financial things that you have 2 ways to log in, not just a password, but you either have a 2-factor sent to your phone, or you have a little dongle that automatically generates another 6-digit code, so that The key is that a hacker would have to have either your phone or that dongle to get into your account. Very unlikely that they're going to have those.
Right. All right. So I think we hit a nice handful of things that people can do to be more secure from their home connection. Somebody's asking for recommendations on the best antivirus software programs. I'm partial. I like Viper Internet Security. That has worked very well for me. I think Bitdefender is also a very good one. There are a bunch of them out there, and sometimes it helps to just, anytime you're going to buy any kind of software for anything, it always helps to go out and read real world reviews on them. One of the things I like about Viper and Bitdefender is that they run relatively lightweight, meaning that they don't bog a computer down. Norton 360, for example, may be extremely secure, but it is just bloated. So there's like 10 or 11 different components built into it. And I've seen computers where, you know, the shop is working on a slow computer. It's got Norton 360 with everything enabled, and the computer runs like slow. And then the software gets removed, and all of a sudden it runs like a normal computer. So I think it's good that Tom has confirmed that Apples don't really need antivirus protection. For somebody who wants paid antivirus above and beyond Windows Defender, I do recommend Viper Internet Security. Has been extremely good. And Bitdefender just recently outranked Viper as far as their ratings on several of the online forums that I've read. So those are both, and they both offer a bundle package where you can buy like 5 or 10 annual licenses for under $100. So if you have a family or a household and you want to protect 5 computers, then you can go out and pay like $70 and get 5 different full subscriptions, where the single one is like $40 or $50. You can get 5 for like $70 or 10 for $99. So what I typically do is I annually buy a subscription to Viper Internet Security, and then I use, and you're allowed to share them. I mean, they're your licenses. So one for my brother, one for my mother, one for my best friend, one for all 4 of the different computers we have at our house. And then I even have a couple of left over. If I find somebody in need, I can actually just give them one of my keys. So, but those are the ones. It's not saying that other solutions aren't really, really good. Those are just the 2 that I'm the most familiar with.
And Phil, I heard Viper. Was it Bitconnector, B-I-T?
Bitdefender.
Bitdefender, B-I-T Defender.
Yep, one word, Bitdefender, and then Viper's V-I-P-R-E.
Oh, I spelled it wrong. Okay, V-I-P-R-E or Bitdefender. So I'll write that in the chat.
Yeah, and the reason I've worked with both. Our business clients that are part of our managed services all have a managed Bitdefender. And so we've got it literally deployed on over 1,000 endpoint computers out there. And the reason we like it is because it does what it's supposed to. It protects the computer, and it doesn't really slow them down. And we can manage them all from one central console. So if we want to, for example, block a specific website that's known malicious, or maybe that just a client wants to block a website, we can go in and just click a couple of buttons, and it's going to block that website from any of the users getting to it. So it's handy. Viper I just like because I've been using it for years, and there have been several times where I was doing research and I tried to go to a website to look something up, and I got a warning from Viper saying, warning, this website is known to have malicious content. Are you sure you want to go there? And of course I say no. So I just like something that's looking at the other end of the internet connection as well.
That's great.
Let me just say that Bitdefender also works on your Android phone. So that's a plus.
Yep.
Thanks for that, Bruce. And a quick question about VPN. You know, so I have an iPhone, I have an iPad, I have 3 devices. So if I purchase a personal VPN for all my devices, do I have to pay for each individual device? Or
most of the ones that I've looked at for private use come with they have like a 5 user. You know, like they basically buy this and you can use it on up to 5 devices with your account.
Okay, so you have to install it individually on each device.
Right, but then you would use the same security credentials to initiate it.
Got it.
Now, if you're traveling and you're using an iPhone or an Android phone, I always recommend, and we always do, we just use our cellular connection. We turn off the Wi-Fi. You've got a lot better.
Yeah.
You got a lot better protection that way than going through any hotel Wi-Fi. And I always use 1Password to generate my long passwords. And I highly recommend against trying to generate your own passwords. I've had several people I worked with over the years, and we live in Charlottesville, doing that themselves, and it was not pretty. after you looked at their passwords, they were too easily guessable. So yes, you can change how those passwords are generated, the length of the passwords, the number of digits, and different characters. So yes, always do that. And in 1Password, they have a hard copy program called an emergency kit. And I highly recommend that everyone print out that hard copy emergency kit. And what is that? Well, the hard copy emergency kit is where you hand write down old technology with a pen and pencil, and you write down your 1Password and you write down other key passwords. You put it either in a lockbox at your bank, or if you have a safe in your home, which I also highly recommend, a Gardall safe in your home, put that there. There are times that we all have where we have a little brain burp and we forget something. And although I think most people can remember 2 or 3 long passwords, we do in our family. Our passwords are 25 characters long, and there are 3 of them that both my wife and I, have committed to memory. But there are times when a brain burp happens, and it's very, very nice to be able to go to that safe and pull it out and say, oh, this is what the password was. So it's good to have that kind of called emergency rescue kit.
Good to know.
Good to know.
Any other quick questions on the VPN and I learned all these terms: SSL, VPN, IPS, yeah, ISP.
Well, there was a good question about, is our iOS devices, iPad and iPhones, more secure of an OS than Windows? And I would have to say my experience is that yes. And for many, many years, Apple and Mac were kind of riding on the reputation of like, well, we don't get infected, we don't get hacked. Well, all good things come to an end. That's not the case anymore. And I can vouch for the fact that we regularly have Apple computers being checked into our repair shop downstairs that have gotten infected, but not at the rate that Windows computers do. And I think part of that is because Apple is more tightly controls their hardware, and because they're not nearly as open source with hardware. So if you get an Apple computer, everything is to their spec, unlike Microsoft, which is very hardware generic, meaning you can install Windows on a Lenovo or on an HP or on a Dell. But with an Apple, the Mac OS is going to go on an Apple computer. So they do have tighter controls, and historically they have had tighter security on their operating system and on their software. A lot of the focus, I think, of hackers in hitting Windows computers is because Windows computers massively dominate the business world. We have 60 companies and 1,200 endpoints that we manage for our clients, and out of that, less than 30 of them are Macs. It's just the nature of the beast. Macs are great for web design, for artistic work, for music recording in studios and photography. There's all these wonderful things. But in the business world, it's very unusual, for example, to walk into an accounting firm and see a Mac computer anywhere, because business applications are specifically written in almost all cases for Windows computers. Not so, there's usually a Mac version, but so for the longest time, Windows computers were the target of hackers because they're looking to get their feet into businesses and steal money. So, basically, I do think that Mac writes a tighter OS and a better OS when it comes to security. I just think that because of the nature of what Macs are used for, they just have never been as big of a target for hackers.
And I want to add to that excellent advice that there are 3 or 4 really, really important personal habits. Is that one, in our family, and I recommend others, never, ever, ever, ever click on a link in an email. Although it may come from your bank, may come from a friend, and it looks just fine, is don't click on a link. Don't download anything from an email, because you're likely the second thing is when you download software, always go to the App Store, the Google App Store or the Apple App Store, or go to the source of the software. Never go to places like CNET or places like that, because you're likely going to get a virus or something which is packaged in it. The next thing is, don't ever click on a link on a pop-up. Pop-ups are one of the worst ways to get it. Ignore pop-ups, especially when it says, update your Adobe Flash or something like that. You're going to get a virus from that. And ignore the pop-up and go to the original. Go open up your Safari or whatever, Chrome or whatever you have. Go to the original place and download it from there. Don't use pop-ups or links in software. And because you may think it's coming from a friend, it is likely that it's contaminated. So my experience with Macs getting infected, it's unfortunately, it's nearly all the time, it's user clicking on something that they shouldn't have clicked on.
Right, and that actually leads right into the last question that came up in the chat, which I think was a good way to wrap it up. Is there any way to protect against ransomware? And that's exactly what Tom was talking about. And what do I do if I get hit? So because of the nature of the business that I'm in, and I get emails from vendors, legitimate clients all the time, I do have to click on links. But with the number of years of experience I have, I'm very good about hovering over a link to tell if it came from the original source. For example, I can hover over a link that supposedly came from BB&T. And by the way, your banks typically will not send you links because they know they're dangerous. But I could hover over, for example, a TD Ameritrade link or a BB&T link, and looking at where that pointer is pointing, pretty well be able to determine if it's legitimate or not. Not always. Sometimes legitimate sources are using third parties to host files, and that's when I hesitate to click. But the bottom line is, if you don't click, and the same thing is true when you're on Facebook or somewhere. I think we talked, our very first webinar was about security, and you'll see these ads on the side of Facebook with some news story, like Paul Hogan dies, or Arnold Schwarzenegger just became a Democrat or whatever, or it's like, and people want to click on those. That they're just tricking you into clicking a link. So what Tom said is very legitimate. Be very hesitant to click a link in an email. Be very hesitant, or basically don't click a link in a pop-up, because pop-ups are known. And that's what 70% of ransomware is delivered through emails. It's a known thing. And what do you do if you get hit? Honestly, if you have good backups, that's going to be your number one defense. If you have, even if it's a week old, at least, I was just talking at the beginning of the session about a client, they lost 3 months worth of data, and they do scientific research. So not only did they lose their reports and stuff that they generated from their work, they lost the original work. So now they've got to go back out and rerun tests and regather their information to rerun all their reports for 3 months. And it's all because, in spite of the fact that let's just say maybe there was nothing they could do to get hit by the ransomware, should have been keeping an eye on their backups. Every single morning, my company, the first hour, my remote support team, the first hour of every day is spent reviewing the backups of every single client to make sure that they were successful. And if not, figure out why. That's the single most important thing to do. So there's a built-in backup program in Macs. There's a built-in Windows has something called Windows Backup, and there's a wizard. You can just type the word backup, and if you plug an external USB drive into a Windows computer, hit start, type the word backup, and you'll see Windows Backup and Restore, and a little wizard will walk you through setting up a simple backup that'll get a complete image of your computer. The hard drive is going to cost you less than $100 to hold your entire backup, and there's no cost for the software. It's built in. Macs, Tom, do Macs still use Time Machine? I know that forgive me for not being well-versed, but. Yes,
they still use Time Machine. It's the old rule we call 3-2-1.
Right.
You want to have 3 backups. Two need to be on different media, and 1 needs to be in the cloud. So that what Phil was talking about was a clone. Super Duper is one hardware that's used. Crash Plan is another one, and in our family, we do that once a month, so that if we get ransomware for some reason, we can go back, and the worst we are is we've only lost stuff for the last month because we've got the ability to go back. Then we use Dropbox, which is a continuous cloud software, and you have the ability there to go back just prior to getting contaminated and recover your files. So having 3 different backups is really important. Time machine is the continuous backup.
Right. So I think I absolutely agree with Tom about the 3-2-1 method. But I would absolutely also say for those of you who have nothing, get something. Start with the one. Get an external USB drive, and you can buy 1 terabyte USB drive, which is enough for most people, from Walmart or from Staples for $60, $70, and get your first full backup. And the first backup, as Tom said, with Windows is an image backup. It's kind of a clone, but then every subsequent day it'll do an incremental. So the first backup might take 4 hours. Subsequent backups will take about 5 minutes because it'll build on it. And then if you swap out that external hard drive with another one once a week and take the one that you unplugged and put it somewhere else. Safe deposit box is great. Just getting it, for example, for if you have an office that you work at, take it to the office. Just have it physically somewhere other than, you don't want the 2 drives in the same room. And then you just run the backup wizard again so that it'll automatically see the new drive. But the bottom line is, if you have nothing in place, at least start by getting a single external drive and get a backup. But obviously, if your building burns down, or if your house burns down, or somebody steals your computer and your backup drives, you're going to want that offsite copy somewhere. And then if you use 3-2-1, that's an even higher level. But it starts with 1, which is getting that first backup done. You will be so grateful if you get hit with ransomware and you have that, and realize that you really can recover all of your data. That's
Quick question, Phil.
sure.
I have 1 drive, and then I have 2 external hard drives.
Yeah.
How long does an external hard drive last? Because a colleague of mine, and a professor, and she's in research, and she said, "Oh, 1 or 2 years hard drive. That's as long as I would give it." So, do you know how long? I mean, the ones in OneDrive in the cloud is okay, but I back up with an archive, and then also after I save things on my own laptop, I save it on one of the external hard drives, and then I archive things from time to time. How long does an external hard drive last?
Since good sized external hard drives are almost always going to be mechanical, meaning they're not solid state, but they're mechanical in nature, meaning they've got a spinning disk and moving parts. They do have a limited lifespan, and you can see them last for years and years and years. But because of the nature of it being a portable hard drive, it means that typically you're not going to get nearly the life expectancy out of a drive that's in a fixed device that's not moved, because they're not getting banged around or moved or bumped. It's going to be, but what I would recommend would be annually replace. If you had, let's say you had the on and off rotation where you're always keeping one on site and one off site, in order to stay ahead of the life expectancy of the drive, if each year you would label one of those 2 drives and make sure you know which one's the oldest as like archive 2021 on the last day of 2021, and then put it in a safety deposit box or somewhere that you consider to be safe, and then bring a new drive in to replace it, then it means that each drive is never going to be older than 2 years. And you'll also have a year-end archive, so that if something gets deleted or overwritten over time and you don't realize it right away, you can say, wow, I haven't worked on that spreadsheet since 2019. You could just go back to your 2019 archive drive and you could find it, even if it wasn't currently on your computer. So I would say it would be a good safety rule not to use an external drive more than 2 years.
Thank you.
Sure.
And just a quick note, I know it's after 4 o'clock, and Phil, if you're willing to take a few more questions, that's great.
Sure.
But folks, please, I know this is such a polite crowd. If you need to go, that's fine, but you're more than welcome to stay as well. So maybe another 10 minutes if people have questions or comments. And thank you too also to Tom. I appreciate you working together to talk about all kinds of computers.
Well, one additional thing I might mention is Phil did an outstanding job with talking about encryption at the beginning. We also highly recommend that you encrypt any laptop that you have. So if somebody gets that laptop, there is a great encryption program on all MacBooks that works extremely well, and also to encrypt the time machine drive that's attached to it. Because if somebody takes, say you're in a Starbucks and you get distracted and somebody takes your time machine backup and or your MacBook, and they're encrypted, they've essentially got nothing. And so it's very easy to encrypt it. You won't even know what's happening after you check the box. And your hard drive on your MacBook is encrypted, and your time machine backup is encrypted. And so highly recommend that for an extra personal protection.
Yes, so that would be encryption, typically encryption of data at rest. Now I have a question for you, Tom. I know there's one thing that has bitten a few people before, is if you turn on Bitdefender, which is the built-in Windows encryption solution, if you turn on Bitdefender and then you subsequently install a BIOS update on the motherboard, the next time you boot, you're going to get prompted for the decryption key for Bitdefender, because it sees the BIOS update as being a hardware change. And because of the nature of encryption, it doesn't want to let you access the drive without typing in a decryption key. Does the same thing happen on a Mac?
It does not, because the encryption on the Mac is built into the operating system. It is not an external piece of hardware,
right.
So it works seamlessly.
Okay, cool.
Nice. Vicki, I see you're unmuted. Would you like to ask a question or a comment?
Yeah, the computers are constantly being updated, new programs, etc. In other words, Mac, iOS is now version whatever. How does this affect what you've saved on your backup hard drives?
The data is almost always going to be accessible from newer versions of software. So for example, if I have a QuickBooks 2014 file that was backed up in 2014, and then I try to open that up using QuickBooks 2019, it's basically going to say, hey, this is an older version of software. I can open it for you, but I have to update it to the latest version of QuickBooks. Other softwares don't really care. For example, you can take a Word document that was written in the year 1999 using Microsoft Word, whatever version that was, Word 95, and you can open it up in in Office 365. It'll open. When you go to save it, it'll prompt you to save it in the updated format. But there's almost usually never a problem with opening older data with a newer version of software. There's backwards compatibility.
Does this also apply to photography software, which is also constantly changing?
Yeah, what tends to happen is in the Apple ecosystem, they make sure that things are backwards compatible in the Apple ecosystem. But then you have external apps, and occasionally a Apple system update will kind of break an external app. And Super Duper is one that got broken recently because they changed the file system. So as long as you're within the Apple app system, you're going to be fine. Some of the external things will not be.
All right, did that kind of answer the question? Like I said, I've very rarely seen where somebody's trying to open an older version of data from a Windows computer and the newer version of the software wouldn't open it. Sometimes you get prompted to convert it, but typically it's not going to be unusable. So
I'm an Apple user and I've loaded with Adobe photography software.
Oh, I got you. Okay. Yeah, I'm not personally familiar with that particular suite.
Yeah.
Sometimes a company like Adobe, they won't be as quick to update their software for full compatibility, and so sometimes there's a little lag there. But we always recommend to install those system updates as soon as you get them. The reason is most of the time those updates are vulnerabilities, hacks, viruses that have happened, and those updates will update the X-Protect system on Macs, and they're very important that those be installed because hackers, as you know, Phil, they're constantly finding new ways to spread their nefarious deeds into our ecosystem. And
Absolutely.
so Apple and Microsoft are working very hard to update those as quickly as they can.
I also have a lot of photographs on Aperture, which is an Apple program which they no longer support. And I'm hoping I haven't lost them.
Well, you would not lose the photographs, because the photographs, and Clay can correct me if I'm wrong in this, but they're usually stored in the Photos app in a separate database. And so you can still access them on, on other photo software.
Aperture is pre-photos, so
Mm, tricky.
yeah.
Phil, are
Well,
you getting all the, go ahead,
Usually
sorry.
those are stored as PNG or JPG files, and those are really separate from those outside apps that may have disappeared.
I just want to ask Phil and Tom if you're amenable. If people have questions or comments, some people are saying, hey, maybe we need some help. Can they give you a call or email you?
Yes, everybody should, I think by now probably has my email address. So one of the questions that came up was people asking if it would be possible to have somebody walk them through the process of adding needed security step by step. That probably wouldn't be me personally. Typically that's what people might bring a computer into the shop to get done and all that. And the nice thing is that we have a policy where if a customer for the repair shop downstairs, whether it's Mac or PC, wants to have something done, but they don't want to just have us do it. They want to learn how to do it. Then they can absolutely book a little time where they can be sitting next to the technician doing the work, so that the next time they want to do it, or if they have another computer that they want to do the same thing to, they can do it on their own. So we absolutely don't hide any secrets of the trade. We're more than welcome to share that. But by default, we probably wouldn't be doing a lot of that no charge, simply because it's one of the things we do for a living.
Sure. Yeah, that's great that you offer that service like that.
But I certainly don't mind sending out. Sometimes a client of ours will say, look, Phil, I'm trying to get blah, 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 blah done on my home computer. Or like setting up an Outlook profile or whatever. And so I'll just basically pull up a quick article that I find online, and I'll send them a link that's got step-by-step instructions. But for example, if somebody wanted to know how to configure Viper internet security, which, well, those things auto-configure themselves. If somebody wanted to know how to set up NordVPN or whatever, you could literally just Google how to configure NordVPN, and the vendor will have posted an article with print screens because they want you to use their software. So anything that we could show you how to do, if you Google it, it'll tell you how to do it. I'll be honest, a lot of times if I run into a Windows program that I haven't worked with before, or if somebody has a Mac that they want me to do something on, I will just go online and say how to configure such and such on a Macintosh, and I'll just find an article and follow the instructions. So yeah.